Live. Hello, everyone, and welcome to Talking About Survivor. I am Christiana Ellis,
I'm Mike Mateen.
and tonight we're talking about Episode 3 of Survivor Season 39, Island of the Idols. And I don't know about you, but I found this to be a frustrating, inexplicable episode.
That's exactly what I was going to say. I thought maybe I just watched it like too late at night last night, but even like going back and just kind of like reflecting on it, it just didn't. I don't understand what happened, really.
Yeah. Well, there and not
I mean,
even
I get what
just
happened, but like I don't know why.
right. Not even just the final decision, but like there was a couple of places in the episode where it just felt like something unusual is happening here with no explanation, and then we just move on. And it's kind of like, so wait, what? So
Yeah,
I'm not sure. There's some good stuff in the episode, but there's definitely several things that left me feeling perplexed.
yeah. I mean, the best part about the episode, I think, was the immunity challenge. That thing was pretty cool this time.
Yeah, no, I agree. I think that was a good challenge. We'll talk more about that for sure. I feel like there is some good interactions with a couple of things. I liked the mission, even though the whole idea of like what you do if there's no fire was clearly like an afterthought.
Yes, yeah. Obviously, it had like the voiceover of like Rob basically saying like, "And if the fire's out, you must
Mm-hmm.
prove you were there." Or
Yeah.
whatever he says. But it's all
Well,
like completely separate from. you know.
and one of the things that Dalton Ross points out in his recap, he's always got lots of good inside info. There is just not that there was anything uh, like fishy about how that was all done, except that he's just pointing out the players are used to hearing people move around all the time because it's cameramen and producers and stuff all the time.
Right, which we
So
talked
the
about that a
idea
little
that you're
last
trying
time.
to sleep and you'd hear someone moving around across camp would be no big deal. That happens constantly. So the idea that it's all of these bits where we see little footage of them seeming to react to a noise, starting to look up. No, nothing. Like that probably just happens all the time.
Yeah, and we talked about that a little last week.
Mm-hmm.
That sneaking in maybe wasn't as hard as it would be had if there weren't people around all the time. You
Mm-hmm.
know, but yeah, you just so
Yeah. But so let's just go ahead and jump back into the beginning of the episode. We had not a lot of group discussion coming back from the tribal council. We had Jack and Jamal were the ones that had been left out of the loop on the last vote, primarily because people were concerned about Molly. They were Molly's two biggest allies, and none of them seemed to want to just lash out at everybody. But we
right,
definitely have two very different responses, right? We have Jack, who's a little frustrated at not having been included in general, but largely only because, like, he's excited to have gameplay kicking off, and, like, he missed the boat on this go round, but he's excited to be on the next one, right?
right,
And so he doesn't seem too overly bummed about loss of Molly, whereas Jamal seemed to take it more personally, like doing the whole like, well, I'm a free agent wild. I think he actually said wild card, going rogue, stuff that sort of thing. Which, like again, as we have observed many times when many players have reacted like that in the past, it's a completely understandable reaction, but it's often not especially helpful.
right.
Because at this stage in the game, when you have just discovered that, you just had one of your allies voted out in a 7-3 vote, it's like, I mean,
Yeah, and you wonder sometimes though, like if they just kind of prep that for the interview, like it's just kind of
yeah,
he's just venting, and if it actually came down to it, like, and they
I
had to vote again, like he's not going to act like that.
right.
It's sort
I
of a visceral,
Yeah.
yeah,
I mean, I think that that's largely true. I think that, it's certainly something where mostly I think he seems to just not want to let them pretend like it wasn't them lying to him about what was happening.
right,
Right? Like it's one thing to say, yes, forgive, don't forget is the way he puts it, right? It's just
yeah,
that he's saying, yes, I'm going to still be able to work with you, but I'm not going to forget that that happened.
right,
The next time you have to try to persuade me to do something, I'm going to be more suspicious of you because there have been times where you weren't honest with me.
yeah,
Yeah, and that's not unreasonable, although, again, pointing that out is not necessarily helpful. I mean, it's kind of one of those things that it's true whether you say it or not.
right,
I mean, it's one thing to say it to the camera, but he did kind of give that vibe to, like, Tommy, for example, where he was still kind of feeling a little bitter about it. I do still like Jamal, and I hope that he's not gonna make that too much of a problem.
right.
But I took notes about Tommy or Jack saying honesty would be chill before I realized that was the episode title. Just because that's a very like 23-year-old way to say something. It's the modern parlance, as they say.
Yes.
Yeah.
Sorry, I was kind of burping and
Oh,
holding your breath.
that's okay.
But yes.
Yeah. What do you think about Tommy, his explanation to Jack being essentially that everyone was just scared of Molly?
I mean, I feel like that's not untrue.
Yeah.
So it's, I mean, it's leaving out some of the pieces, but it's not
Right.
wrong. Well,
Well,
yeah, I feel like that's a reasonable thing to tell him.
yeah. I mean, I'm not questioning that it's largely accurate. It's more a matter of it's kind of dismissive of Jack's own agency in everything. You know what I mean? It's kind of doesn't say we were worried about like the three of you seemed really tight, and so when we wanted to target Molly, we didn't want to. We weren't sure how close you guys were. Instead of it just kind of being well, we wanted to target Molly, and you guys were kind of just incidental. Like it definitely casts him as like we don't think you're a threat, which is on the one hand he's trying to make the case like you don't have to worry that we're targeting you now, but on the other hand it also Jack didn't seem to really take it this way, but I kind of reacted where it felt like Tommy's saying like we don't see you as a threat, therefore like you're fine, but only because we don't care about you.
Yeah, that's not how I took. Like, I took it probably more of like how Jack did. Is that like, he. I feel like Tommy didn't want to come and say like, "Hey, we were worried about all three of you. That's why we didn't tell any of you," because then it puts him and Jamal on edge.
Mm-hmm.
This way Tommy's leaving the door open to continue working with him, which he wanted to do.
Mm-hmm.
And but I didn't read it as like, oh yeah, you're really not that important. I just read it as like, hey, like we can keep working together. Like it was really just Molly that we needed to get out, and I think it's understood. Like Jack seemed to understand that. Like, yeah, I understand why you wouldn't tell me and Jamal because we were close with her, and we, like he's being reasonable, which they don't always do in this. Where when they like Aaron, I think it was last week when he's like, "Oh, you should have told me."
Yeah.
No,
Yeah.
dude. Like, there's like obviously, like think about what you would have done if we told you. Like,
Right.
don't come and say you would have been totally on board. You're lying. Like,
Mm-hmm.
but I feel like Jack was more like, "Yeah, I get why you didn't tell me." probably would have told Molly.
Yeah. And like Aaron, by contrast, this go around, this episode, we didn't really see a lot from Aaron, but I feel like he must have been really centrally involved in the missing pieces of this episode that we don't understand what happened.
Yeah, it was really edited kind of clunky. I mean,
Yeah, well, I maybe it's just an element of them struggling to build the narrative for this episode without kind of spoiling. It's the thing they always try to do of having things trying to have things seem like a surprise at the end, but it can end up coming across so surprising because it's just inexplicable and there's been no groundwork to explain, you know, why a bunch of characters who have only spoken about wanting to do something else would do something that's completely contrary to that for reasons that are not clear.
right. Well, especially, yeah, like you said, it's completely contrary. Not only is it contrary to what we saw them discussing, but it is basically exactly what Aaron and those guys wanted.
Yeah.
Like, so they wanted to keep they didn't want to get rid of a girl because they wanted to keep the girl thing strong, but yet they did exactly what the guys told them to do.
Right, and voted out the one guy that had explicitly said he wanted to work with them.
Right, and put the other set of votes on one of the girls.
Yeah.
So had he used his idol, they would have lost a girl.
Well, and specifically, also, the way it went down, how is Karishma not completely alienated from all those girls after this episode?
Right, like how does she buy into this all-girls alliance when...
She can't. It's bullshit is what it is. It's been revealed now as nothing. It's popped like a soap bubble.
Away from going home.
Yeah. Well, and not only that, but they lied to her face having this happen right after Chelsea's whole, like, well, we didn't ever want you to feel that way, except that apparently you actually did feel that way. It's, we'll get more into that because I had feelings about some of that stuff.
Yeah.
Which I didn't realize until the outcome turned out to be what it was. Because when I thought that that's not what the outcome was, it's like, oh, that's nice to at least do your best to try to be reassuring. But then it's revealed to be like, oh, no, it's all just bullshit. It's like, that made me unhappy.
Yeah. Well, let's keep moving so we can get to that.
Yeah, exactly. Yes.
So,
what
happened here.
We rejoin Lyro tribe at this point with the Girls Alliance is cheerful. They're in power. Things they have the numbers. Things seems to be going well, and we have Karishma actually talking about a little bit about how she does feel like she doesn't 100% relate to the other girls. It's something she struggles with, but she is pushing herself to go outside her normal comfort zone in order to try to be one of the girls.
Right.
And it seems like, it's an interesting perspective that I feel like we haven't really heard much on Survivor. Someone talking about even just mild discomfort about showing that much skin on TV. And it wasn't like a big deal. Like, she obviously was mostly just saying, I'm not used to this. It feels weird. And, I think that's, interesting. But what we also see is her making the effort, right?
Right. Yeah. I like like she didn't just like flat out refuse. She just had a dialogue about it.
Yeah.
Which I thought, I think that interesting. I mean, this cast is, I didn't pick up on it at the beginning, but once we saw this, it kind of struck me that this is a fairly diverse cast for Survivor. We've had a lot of, age difference ones and stuff like that, but it has, it's tended to just be a lot of white people, and with maybe a couple of people here and there, but this one seems, there's just a lot more just people representative, and I think that this kind of highlighted that, because it's like, oh yeah, not only are they from diverse backgrounds, but like some of them still have like again, she has the Indian cultural upbringing in it that she's bringing in and adding something that we never would have seen before. that was just kind of a cool little flavor thing to,
Mm-hmm.
To the whole show. I thought, yeah, it was really interesting to see. So,
I agree. In the meantime, we also have Vince being brought into the rest of the guys, but and kind of smiling and nodding, but then telling the camera about how it's like now that the guys realize that it's 5-4 and the girls have the numbers, now all of a sudden they want to be best friends with me. Well, I don't buy it. He would absolutely rather work with the women, and I was thinking good for him at that point. It's potentially risky just in the sense that the girls' alliance doesn't have to agree to bring him along, right? But at the same time, why wouldn't they go ahead and accept an extra vote who's willing to work with them? Except that apparently, well, I mean, we'll talk more about what happened, but it's still just bizarre.
yeah.
In any event, the yeah, so we have him just explaining where he's at. Then we jump back over to the Vokai tribe. Excuse me. And we have Dan talking about he's glad that Jack and Jamal were kind of naive in terms of easily fooled about the plan to switch it to Molly. But he's mentioning that rather than necessarily just going to target one of them next, Nora continues to be kind of aggravating to everyone, and so maybe she's an easy vote. And we do see a little bit more from her of just the same sort of behaviors that we saw last week, but it's just kind of a little micro montage to show that stuff's still kind of going on. But I thought it was interesting. I noted briefly here that it seemed like Jamal was going to be in Jason's old shoes, like now that Jason had sort of managed to flip the script and get it on the majority of the numbers. Is Jamal now in the position of wanting to be the only one that might be willing to work with Nora instead of just having her be the easy vote? And it seemed like that might be something that was going to work. And so we see him starting to do some stuff to maybe push against Dan. Like he talks about like the used car salesman vibe, and describes it as feeling kind of icky. He lobbies Janet, who seems like she's ambivalent about it. Like she can see some of that, but it's also obviously a change of plans for what she had been planning to do. So she goes to talk with Tommy about it, but Tommy is less persuaded. And, basically makes a good case, I think, from Tommy's perspective, and maybe Janet's too, that it's like, well, he has a point, but that's really a move that's good for Jamal, not necessarily a move that's good for us. So we can definitely see why it would be a great thing for him, but that's not necessarily good for us, especially given that something being good for Jamal is not necessarily good for us. Like, not even just they're not the same, but we also maybe don't want to give him survivor points, so to speak.
Right.
But there's some discussion about, like, does that mean, well, if he's making moves that we don't want to get on board with, does that mean we should maybe target him? And, that's where we... there's some discussion about that, but then we get the whole bit with Karishma cuts her hand, and even though we hear the line see the bone," a bunch of times, like we didn't see any bone, but so I don't know, like it might have been a little bit of an overreaction.
Yeah, I mean the whole thing was sort of odd, and
Yeah.
She's saying see the bone, but then like the rest of the tribe's like only barely reacting, which was weird. And
Well, her hand's clearly bleeding, though, right? And she mentions feeling faint, and she kind of goes down on the ground, and then the camera literally pans up from her to see the rest of the tribe literally doing nothing and like not even looking in her direction.
Yeah, so the whole thing was kind of odd.
Yeah. I
And then they
mean,
just bandaged her and she was fine. So it was hard to decipher, like, is she always sort of overly dramatic about some of these, not injuries, but just things in general, to where that they just weren't paying attention? Like,
right.
I don't know. It was weird, and it's kind of. I know that doesn't really have anything to do with like later in the episode, but it's where you started kind of feeling a little off kilter, like, because it's like, why aren't they reacting? Like, why do they not care? And then it just sort of became like a non-issue. Like, all of a sudden, like, she was bandaged and like they never talked about it again.
Yeah.
It just kind of left you kind of a little sitting kind of weird, and then for the rest of the episode to go the way that it did, like, again, it's like all these little small things led to, obviously the big thing is what we talked about at the end. It's like, we didn't expect this end outcome because it didn't make any sense, but you had this, and we already talked a little bit about like the weird thing with the fire and like how it was out, and so they added this thing. Like, the whole episode just kind of just didn't ever find its legs. Like, and there's just weird little scenes like this where you're like, I'm not sure how I'm supposed to feel about this, because they don't seem to care. Like, am I mad that her tribe doesn't care, and she's injured to the point where she's like feeling faint?
Yeah.
Are we supposed to be like, oh well, because she's obviously super dramatic and that's why they don't pay attention? Or what? I don't understand what we're supposed to feel in that moment.
As depicted on the show, which obviously, as we know, the editing can make that complicated, right? But as presented on the show, I am pissed at the rest of the tribe. Because maybe the cut turned out to not be that big a deal, but she's clearly reacting as though it's a big deal and not even getting any attention at all. They're not even checking on her to see if it's okay. They're not walking her over to the medical. She says, I'm feeling faint, and goes down on the ground while her hand is actively bleeding, and they're just talking and having completely unrelated conversation.
Right. So, like you said, as presented, like, yeah, you're pissed, like, wow, why do they care?
Yeah.
But then you're left with a weird closure on it when it turns out to seem like it's actually nothing, And I know they still should have paid attention, but it's like, it's just weird. Like,
well, it's not nothing. It's just not life threatening, right?
Well, yeah. I mean, but I guess when I say nothing, like, it's like almost not addressed again. Like, she just comes back with a bandage, and like, they never talk about it.
So what we have in this episode is a couple of different pieces, and you could tell a couple of different versions of a story depending on things that were not shown, because it would seem, based on what happens at the end of the episode, that at least by that point, the other girls probably did not feel especially close to Karishma. They did not especially want to include her. They were willing to let her be voted out, right? And so that was something where, at that point, there was clearly some level of alienation. We go back to where she gets the cut. After that point, the way they react, and her seeing that reaction drives a huge wedge. Right? Where she feels betrayed by them, like none of them really care about me. And so we could imagine that even if there wasn't any alienation before, it would be there afterwards because she feels betrayed by them. Right?
Right.
But it also could be that it actually existed on their part before, and that's why they didn't react. Because even though we see her talking about making an effort, it's possible that from their perspective, they're trying to be nice, but she's weird and she doesn't seem to click with everyone, and they're not really sure how to handle that, and she tends to be over dramatic and complain about things, and then, okay, she's got a tiny cut and she's acting like it's the end of the world. Like, we could imagine from that perspective, like we could see that narrative, except that we don't ever get any scenes from that perspective. Right? That's not how the episode tells the story.
Right.
So is this a story where what we actually have is the mean girl clique who don't like Karishma, and they give her the cold shoulder when she gets a cut, and then they lie to her face that they're actually wanting to be nice, but then they're willing to stab her in the back? Or is this a case where she is the one that doesn't fit in with everybody else and is really over dramatic about it and is just not fitting in? Right? There's you could imagine a whole spectrum of stories between those two, but we only have what they showed us, and those pieces don't seem they all belong to the same version of the story.
Right. Yeah, because it feels like if there's some aspect of that Mean Girl clique, it you can see. I can get why they wouldn't show it, because they were, we just complimented on how interesting it was, about her having like this anxiety about running around, barely clothed, and like that's just not a thing that she was brought up to be okay, but she's really making an effort. If you then follow it up with like, yeah, she's making an effort, but she's like making a huge deal about it, and it's like kind of weird. Like, we get it, like this is weird for you, but stop saying, like, if there was like that scene sort of diminishes the other scene that they liked.
Right.
So you maybe miss out on some of that, and also it might have telegraphed what was going to happen at the end a little bit if we.
Right. Well, and I wonder if part of it could be too that because obviously from the editing narrative building standpoint, the producers have certainly decided that they're willing to show Nora as being abrasive and hard to live with, and in that sort of thing, aggravating to everybody, right? They certainly show that for her. Is this a case where they just didn't want to have two different people getting that same kind of storyline?
Yeah, maybe.
But if that's the case, we have no evidence of that. It's just pure speculation, right?
Right.
So, all we can go by is what they show us, and at least in general, it has felt like they're usually not cutting, they're usually not making stuff up completely in editing, right? Like they're finding which through lines actually kind of matter, and then they emphasize those, and maybe they de-emphasize the things that don't contribute to that. But in this case, it really feels off.
Yeah, there's some things like conspicuously missing from this one.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Like again, like we just talked about, like the resolution with her hand, like it's this huge dramatic thing. They're not paying any attention to her, and then she shows up with a bandage, and it's like it's never talked about again. It's never talked about their reaction. We don't talk about like what was actually wrong with her, like so they don't give us any indication like whether was she being overly dramatic, or was it just like, was it legitimately bad but it was able to be patched up, and she just needs to be careful. Like, we don't know any of that. It's conspicuously not there. Just like it's conspicuously not there that what Kevin says when he comes back from the island of the idol. Vince, sorry, Vince. Yeah. I don't know why I said Kevin. Vince, when he comes back, like this, it's something that you're waiting for, because you've already had one of them has been there and lied about what's there, and now your second person is coming, and that whole thing just doesn't exist.
And especially given that they end up voting for him against other stated interests, it seems like it must have been important, right? Because the only possible reason for them to go with this plan instead of their Girls Alliance thing is if they think that it is that important that they flush any idol that he might have, or that some advantage, and they are just that scared of it. Like, that's the only logic I can imagine that would justify it.
Yeah, that's what it has to be. Like, whatever happened, they are convinced he has an idol, and they were willing to get rid of the other girl to flush it, but they also would rather like send him home with it if they could.
Right.
But they were expecting that he could play whatever this advantage is, and she would go home. Like, but again, none of that. Which, sorry, I jumped ahead, but that part really bugged me, because I really was waiting to see it. I'm like, oh, I wonder if he's gonna like follow her lead and like say that, yeah, that's exactly what happened there, and I didn't win either, or or are they going to? Is he going to try to like go and talk with her separately?
Right.
Like, but
Yeah.
it's just it like literally just doesn't exist in the episode.
Mm-hmm.
Like he just comes back.
Yeah. It's aggravating.
Yeah.
Yeah. Uh, so
So yeah.
we do have at this point, after the cut, this is where we do get the bit where Vince is pulled away to go to Island of the Idols, and we have everybody standing there in a group agreeing that if he's going to get some idol, they might want to flush it. And then Dean is standing there saying, well, maybe we split the votes, and it has to be pointed out to him, everyone else is right here, so who exactly are you proposing to be the other person? And he's like, good point. So, not that it seems to have hurt his game any. It's more just kind of a faux pas that nobody seems that concerned with.
Yeah, I mean it was more fun and more amusing than anything. I mean, obviously, like, they're all smart enough to know that conversation was going to happen.
And the other thing is too, Karishma is sure that she would be the other person, and no one's willing to say so to her face. And as things end up turning out, she was probably intuiting correctly that is the actual answer, that they just didn't want to say so in front of her.
Right, and that's where Dean's faux pas was. What more of it was is that everybody already probably knew who the other person was.
Yeah.
And he was just kind of like assuming like, well, yeah, I mean, we'll just split the votes between him and Karishma, but didn't say that out loud. And then they were kind of like, hey, dude, like, you can't say that when everybody's here, you know?
Yeah.
So, yeah.
Yeah, so this is where we get Vince at the Island of the Idols, and he gets really emotional talking with the two of them, and he's kind of overwhelmed. And it's kind of nice having Rob moved somewhat too, in terms of just like, realizing how influential you've been to someone else is, it's profound experience. And in the meantime, we don't get a lot of cutaways to Sandra saying those sorts of things, probably because she doesn't say those sorts of things.
Right.
That is not who Sandra is.
Exactly.
But so the lesson this time, staying calm under pressure. We've talked already about just, some of the nuances of what it means to try to sneak into the other camp. He wants to risk it. It seems like actually, a fun idea. Like, who wouldn't want to try to do that? Like, even if you lose your vote, like, it's almost worth losing your vote just to get to try to do that, I feel like. So
yeah. And it also led to just an absurdly unnecessary scene of like Sandra training him to like army crawl.
Which again, yeah, which was like, it was funny, but also really didn't. Like, he didn't even do that, really.
Nor did he need to. Like, no. It was absolutely unnecessary, but it was hilarious.
Yeah,
like,
it was fun.
Yeah.
But yeah, so he's, he wants to do it. I liked that they actually had a map for him to look at. I think that we had lots of tension created by showing, like, oh, so-and-so is having a bad dream. Is that going to wake everyone up? Is that going to be a problem? Lots of people reacting to noises. That may have all been assembled in the editing. Probably was, frankly. You know what I mean? It's not like we have a lot of shots of him at the fire, then pan over to them actually reacting. It was all separate cuts, so who knows? Right, but like, I don't care very much about that.
Right, it was fine. I mean, this was it was just a fun little goofy thing in the episode.
I just feel like, though, that it seems like a mistake to me to have floated the idea in advance that he could do something other than the fire, because I wanted the tension of him thinking he has to get fire and getting there and there's no fire. Like, wouldn't that have been more exciting to watch for us to know that, oh no, what does he do now? He has to think of something. Why do they establish up front that there's going to be some secondary thing? Like, I
See,
feel like that deflates some of the tension. As soon as they say that, you know that's what's going to happen.
yes, but here's what I think might have happened is that he went there
Hmm.
and there was no fire, and I don't think that he came up with that idea on his own.
Hmm.
I think that he left and like talked to a producer and said, "What am I supposed to do? There's no fire," and they had to come up with a solution
Hmm.
on the spot and said, "Well, if you can go prove that you were there and there's no fire, like I think we can work with that." And so
Yeah.
he goes back and does that. And so like yes, they didn't put that in the edit. It makes it kind of smooth, but at the same time, I I just feel like they felt like they needed to get it out of the way because
Yeah. I
he
mean,
never had that conversation with himself of what do I do now. You know,
well, I feel like though that it's
the tension didn't
still
exist, is what
all
I'm trying
that.
to say.
Well,
Yeah,
but all they needed to they that could have all been true, and all they would have needed to do is cut to him at a confessional in the middle of that scene saying, "I didn't know what to do. I got there and there's no fire. I had to think of something." Right? Like, I mean, that you don't even if he didn't have that moment
yeah,
live, they could have just had him recap it, right, in a confessional.
yeah. That makes sense. Yeah, no, I agree with you.
Yeah, I mean, it wasn't bad this way. It just seemed like they had the C team editors on this episode, like so many other.
Right, and
Um,
that's what we were just talking about. Like, there's just a lot of weird little things that just sort of add up to like really feeling disconcerted this whole episode.
hmm.
Like
Hmm.
the whole thing, and I think that's probably part of why I like the challenge so much. Is not just because it was a cool challenge, but it's like the one thing that like ran smoothly.
Yeah,
It was pretty straightforward. Like it didn't sit. It sat in the right spot from a Survivor episode, whereas the rest of the episode is all off kilter a little bit.
yeah, yeah.
You know,
I will give this episode an awful lot of credit for the bit where he's gloating about Mission Impossible and then slips and falls on his butt in the mud.
yes,
I would that was you know uh,
yeah. I mean, there's funny
that
stuff
was
in it. Like,
good.
yeah, the fake army crawl in there. Like,
I like that.
yeah, there's fun stuff. Like, it wasn't like a terrible episode. It was just weird.
Hmm. Hmm. Yeah. So in any event, he does take the ashes back, and they do decide that that counts. In an interview, Probst says that at least his answer to this question is the producers did not tell Rob and Sandra that they had to accept that. It was basically they were given leeway, but at the same time, like what other result could they have done? Like if they had said no, that's no good. That's not a fair challenge anymore, and I think that they're savvy enough to recognize that that would be unfair and it's not fun to watch anymore at that point. Like
Right.
if he couldn't get fire because there was no fire, like at that point the only way for him to come back with the fire they asked for would be to get it in some other way that's not what the actual challenge was. So yeah,
Right.
it's not a yeah. So even if the producers didn't tell Rob and Sandra they had to count that as a win, I think that they, how could they have really decided any other way? I
Right.
mean, they could have, but it would have been dumb, and they know that.
Yes.
So that does bring us to the challenge, which had lots of cool elements. First of all, it was kind of neat having a first phase where it was literally just a swim off between the Olympic swimmer and a lifeguard.
Yep.
I mean, good for Janet in terms of holding her own as well as she did against an actual Olympic swimmer.
Yeah.
She's clearly, as one of the older women, playing right now, she has proven herself in a couple of ways already in terms of they should not underestimate her.
No, I've been, mildly impressed by her.
Mm-hmm.
Because again, we talked. I know in the pre-show about how we weren't sure if she was going to be
Mm-hmm.
kind of like because she has kind of a weird attitude to her like answers, but when you see her in person, like her description of herself was legitimate. Where like you look at her and you think that she's going to be gruff, but she's actually really super friendly and like kind
Yeah.
of funny, and yeah, and so she doesn't behave or act the way that she looks. Like it's really
Yeah.
it's interesting, you
The
know.
phrase that just came to mind to describe how she feels on the show is low maintenance.
Yeah,
Like, she is self sufficient. She can take care of herself. She doesn't need you to, uh, you know, that's a cute puppy.
she's sitting
So,
there.
yeah.
Go do something else.
No, he wants to be with you.
No, he wants to
Um,
go outside and go to the
well,
bathroom, but he's going to have to hold it.
but yeah, but she makes interactions with her easy, and she is holding her own with working at camp and in challenges, and that can add up to an under the radar player for the first 2/3 of the game. And just as she's running her relaxed pace, and then by the time she gets to end game, she's just going to go ahead and make her move, and she could do really well.
Yeah, I'm excited to see more of her, and yeah,
Yeah.
so
And then the big balance beam was kind of an interesting idea, uh, where I was surprised how far away from the end of the beam that the bag was, though. Right?
yeah,
Like
they're tricky. Yeah,
yeah, like Missy has some long arms, and she was still having to really reach for it. So I was surprised about that. Just like I think that there were probably some of the players that literally would not be able to reach it.
yeah. I mean, some might have had to like jump for it, right? Like, yeah.
Well, but it had to be untied too. It wasn't just like hanging.
Oh, yeah, that's right. Yeah, you're right. So you have to have somebody who could reach it. You're right.
Yeah,
Yeah,
that was interesting. But in any event, the balance beam didn't really seem to like. It was interesting to watch, but it didn't prove especially difficult or challenging, really, in terms of any drama happening.
yeah,
It's still always about the puzzle in these types of challenges, but it was a cool puzzle. And we see that one of the big failings for the Lorai tribe, despite getting to start first, is that like they got to that point where they see a shape and they're saying, look for a T shape. But there was it wasn't one piece that fit in there. It was two pieces.
right.
So they spent a lot of time trying to figure out what piece fit in that spot when it was actually two different pieces together that would fit in that spot.
Right. And so they just never got started, really. I mean,
Yeah.
they just sort of stalled out.
I mean, they got, they kind of got there eventually, but like, in terms of that over that particular hurdle, but they were slow enough that the other team just dominated in the puzzle. And of course, this was bad for Karishma because for one though, like later there was discussion about like if you're going to put yourself out there to be on puzzles, you need to be good at puzzles. And they kind of said that, like implying Karishma without actually saying her name. And I was thinking like, okay, well, Dean was there too. And also, it's not like we didn't see her say, oh, put me on the puzzle. Could this have been a thing where we don't think you're strong or fast, so we're putting you on the puzzle?
Right. And if you can't do the puzzle, like, what good are you?
Yeah.
You know,
Like, that's the implication for sure.
You can't do the puzzle, so you're not helpful.
Yeah. So, yeah. In any event, as we go into that, as we're moving forward, we have Aaron talking about how Vince is the top priority to go, primarily just because of the unknowns about what advantage or idol he might have gotten at the island. Which, I mean, when you're looking for any reason to pick someone at this point, like that's not a bad reason to target someone necessarily. Although from the guy's perspective, it's a little bit. Maybe they just like, why would they not be working harder to try to target a woman if they're worried about the Girls Alliance?
because I don't think anybody's actually worried about the girls' alliance. Like, they were
Well,
willing to
certainly revealed
sacrifice a
this time
girl.
as
Like,
being kind of, yeah.
yeah, and it's like, and Vince was probably telegraphing a little bit of what he said to us,
Mm-hmm.
the viewers, that he was willing to work with the girls at the expense of the guys. So they probably had a little bit of that.
Mm-hmm.
So he has the advantage. He's not a reliable vote
Mm-hmm.
to the guys. The girls don't really seem like, by the result of this, it doesn't seem like they have their stuff together. Like, it doesn't,
No.
like, they're not a girls' line. Like, it's weird. It's
Yeah.
just all
Well,
odd.
especially
Yeah.
weird because at this point we have certainly the guys, we have Aaron and Tom talking about splitting the votes between Vince and Karishma. And I was noting at this time, it's like, but this is the guy's plan, and it actually relies on all of the girls to vote Vince when we know that they don't want to do that.
Except that they did that.
Except that they did, and so that's frustrating. And we actually have Missy talk about she doesn't want to give up either of those two. We either give up one of our own alliance members or the one guy on the other side that wants to work with us. Why would we agree to that split? Except that,
They do.
and that's what they do. And so that's why it's so frustrating is we see her explain to us why that would be dumb for them to agree to, and yet that's apparently what they actually do. So they decide about talking, about
Yeah,
voting.
because like when you watch the votes at the end, like that's exactly how it went down.
Mhm.
Like all the girls voted for Vince, and all the guys voted for Karishma.
I think what maybe happened here is that, there's some discussion of, well, okay, if not Vince, then who? Well, maybe Tom. He's older, maybe less valuable. But Elizabeth likes Tom. Elaine likes Tom. They don't want to vote for Tom. They would rather see Vince go over Tom. And so maybe that's just where they couldn't come to an agreement on who it would be if not Vince.
Right.
And I think maybe everyone is just so paranoid about these potential idols that even if they don't necessarily want Vince gone, they want him to not have an idol. Right? So if he goes, then oh well, but we definitely don't want him to have an idol. But again, and so I could understand, like, if they're that scared of Vince's idol and they just couldn't agree amongst their group who it should be other than Vince, like, I could get that. And then having Karishma be the other side is like, on the one hand, you could sort of see like this sociopath math being, well, we think it'll be Vince to go, and in order for this plan to work and have the guys not scramble, we have to do what they're going to say. And so, like, maybe in their minds, what they're thinking is, if Vince is the one that goes out, then we have maintained our 5,
Because
and
we
they've
didn't
lost
vote
even
for her.
another guy.
Right. And all the
But
guys are the ones who voted for Karishma.
yeah,
So they have like a plausible, like, well, yeah, we all.
except that they don't, though, right?
Well,
Like,
in their,
not
in
really.
their minds, they've
Yeah.
created this like, oh no, Karishma, we're still good. Like it was the guys who voted for you.
Right.
Yeah.
And
We
so
voted for Vince
it's
and just didn't tell you, or did they tell her? I can't remember.
no, well, I actually I'm not 100% sure now that I think about it.
Yeah, I can't remember who. I mean, the whole thing, like, it's hard to remember some of these like nuances.
Yeah.
The whole thing was sort of. Again,
Hang on, I'm going to pull up the little actual voting history just to see who she voted for. So Karishma did vote for Vince.
Okay.
So I don't know, maybe it's possible that they tried to assuage her by just saying, look, this is what the guys want to do. We don't think we can save Vince, but I don't. All it would have taken for Karishma to go home is for Vince to have played the idol that he did have,
That he
right?
had, right? Exactly.
Yeah.
Like,
And so Vince himself was the only one kind of not in on this, still voting for Tom. Presumably that's what, the girls all told him. But the thing is, with five of them, the girls could have just voted for anyone they wanted,
right?
right? And maybe
Yeah, they didn't have to like assuage any of the guys. Like, they didn't need to do any of that.
well, so here's maybe the problem. If they can't agree on who it would be other than Vince, and they feel like they want to target Vince, and they're worried he does have an idol, then five is not enough to split the vote amongst themselves against whoever the guys might vote for, right? So they all voted together for Vince, and they can't really control what the guys do. But at the same time, we don't see them try to do anything about discussing, like, having that conversation of, like, we see that some of the girls don't want to vote for Tom, but there's no discussion of whether, like, is it just that they think, oh, we need to keep the tribe strong for, by keeping Aaron and Dean. Dean was on that puzzle too. Why is
Yeah.
Dean so valuable when Karishma is not, when she's in one of your supposed alliance? If Vince plays his idol and then Karishma goes home this time, they've lost their numbers.
If that was what was important to them,
Yeah.
but which is of course what we're told, but it doesn't seem like it was. Otherwise, why
Right.
did they let that happen?
Yeah. And the only thing that makes any sense at all is if they were just literally so paranoid about Vince maybe having an idol that they felt that getting rid of that was higher priority than any other consideration.
Yeah, and we don't know any of that because again, we don't know how he, like, what he did when he came back that would like maybe lead them to believe that.
Yeah.
Like I said, it's conspicuously missing. It was, and I can just keep reiterating that because I'm so frustrated by it because I was so excited to see it. Like the whole episode, I'm waiting for. This is what I want to see happen. I want to see what happens when the second person from a tribe comes back after people have been lying about what's over there. Like how does that reconcile? Like, what do they choose to do? And how do they choose to position it? Like, do they come back guns blazing and be like, yeah, Elizabeth lied. That is not what's going on over there. Or do they come back and just like frame their lie to match her lie? Like, I want to see that. And we didn't get it. Like,
what if we had?
I'm so mad.
Yeah. Wouldn't it have been cool to have a scene where Elizabeth, is watching Vince come back and tell the story and basically tell the same story Elizabeth did, and then do a big old, wink in her direction, and for her to just go, well, I've got to get rid of him because he's the only other person who knows. Like, who knows? Like, we don't know what happened because they deprived us of all of that. Now, I think I saw somewhere that there was an interview with him where he explained what he did, but I only saw it, like it was a podcast interview. I would have had to listen to the whole podcast, and I had not yet done that. So, where at least he explained what he said about it. But going based on the episode that they showed to us on TV, they denied us that in a way that left us scratching our heads at the end. So at the, just before Tribal Council, we have Chelsea saying really the only issue she sees from voting for Tom is that the guys would be mad about it, like the Dean and Aaron. But so what?
Yeah.
So again, I think it's got to just be they're so paranoid about the idea of Vince having an idol that overwhelmed any other consideration, and they're maybe just hoping that the fact that Vince didn't play it and Karishma didn't go home, that they're going to maybe try to like, and I mean, she voted for Vince, so she had to know that the plan wasn't really Tom. But it seems like she was essentially just put in a position where what's she going to do? She going to sit there at tribal council and complain that they were mean to her about her hand? How's she going to do that when she's depending on them?
Right. I mean, she might have thought that Tom was the other vote, like this split vote.
Yeah.
So that she didn't know that it was her. But like again, now she has to go back to that tribe when for like literally like had he played his idol, like she would have gone home. Like that's got to be weird for her. I don't know how she's gonna handle it.
I honestly really turned on Chelsea in this episode because it was one thing for her to be no, that never mind. I was thinking of Molly about an exchange earlier where she was saying like it's hard to tease me because I just don't care, that sort of thing. But that was not Chelsea.
Molly from this.
Yeah, I know. That's what I just said.
Sorry.
Yeah. So, but I had not had really strong feelings about Chelsea. But what I was really frustrated here is that on the one hand, there's maybe a lot that we're not seeing about Karishma's interactions with the other girls. But certainly her perception is that they kind of play at being nice, but I don't feel really like I belong. And I can certainly, I think a lot of people can relate to that feeling. But when Chelsea kind of tosses in this like, oh, I'm sorry you felt that way. We never wanted you to feel that way. You are one of the girls. Like, I felt like it rang a little bit hollow at the time. And then given the actual outcome, it definitely did.
Yeah.
So, like, because the girls could have just controlled this. They could have just, worked with Vince and gotten rid of Tom, and they could have made that happen easily. And not put Karishma at risk. And maintained the one guy that, and having one of the guys that's left be the one who had already said he wanted to work with them. And they could make all of that contingent on like, tell us if you have an idol, that sort of thing, right? Like they could have leveraged that. But yeah, so it makes it all feel especially hollow, and it just reminds me of this idea that like it's true that this can be a complicated social thing, right? Where if someone's trying to fit in, but they know it's not quite clicking, right? It is not 100% on the other person to make them feel like they belong, right? Right. It's a two-sided relationship, right? If someone's not clicking with the group, it's not the rest of the group's responsibility to force that clicking to happen. But it's also, the idea of like, well, we're not making you feel excluded on purpose, therefore it means that we have no fault in the matter at all. Or it could just be that, yeah, we actually do treat you like you don't belong, but it would make us feel bad about ourselves to think that we're being mean girls. So we've decided to say that we're not doing that, no matter how you feel about it. You know what I mean? Like we are lacking the context necessary to know what's the actual situation there. But I certainly, in this episode as presented, felt the vibe heavy with Karishma that they are kind of being a mean girls clique. They don't actually care very much about her. And they're willing to put her at risk to maybe flush an idol for someone who's not a big threat necessarily. And then give her sort of empty platitudes about, well, but we're not trying to make you feel excluded. It's not our fault that you're so weird.
It was only the guys who voted for you.
Yeah.
Like, we didn't vote for you. Mm-hmm. Don't be mad at us.
Right.
Yeah.
So, as presented in the episode, that's how I felt about it, and so I'm pretty down on all of them now, honestly. Um, I mean, maybe slightly less so on Elaine and Elizabeth, just because we know that they like Tom, so they had that motivation to not want to have the plan B to take out Tom, right?
Yeah.
But why Vince, and so like, but I don't know, Missy as sort of like the self-declared leader of this girls alliance explained why this was a bad idea and then did it anyway. And then we have Chelsea, who seems like she's just the one that's kind of, you know, mouthing the empty words of like, oh no, totally, you're totally one of the girls, yeah. And I don't want to put that on her because I don't know that that's actually true. Like there's all sorts of social context that we could be missing, but I will absolutely fault the producers of the show for setting us up to feel a complicated way
Yeah.
about what these characters are doing and then deprive us of the context that would allow us to make sense of any of it. Like
Yep.
they're certainly not shy about implying that Nora just gets on everybody's nerves because she's weird. So if that's what's happening, why would they not show us that? But if that's not what's happening, why are those girls being such bitches?
Right. And when we don't see any of it. So
Yeah. So
yeah.
frustrating
Anyway.
episode. And it's sad to have Vince go, especially given that he just had gotten to have his idol, and so to go home with an idol in his thermos, which, like on the one hand, we can kind of understand why he wouldn't have felt like he was in danger, because it seems like such a stupid idea for the girls to have done that.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, so the one interesting thing that we'll get though now is we'll see potentially if that idol now gets recycled into a camp,
Yeah.
um, and if somebody can find it. So
Well, yeah, I don't know. I think the rules have maybe not been consistent. The difference between when it's played versus when it's taken out of the game by someone not playing it and going
oh
home.
yeah, that's right, because we were talking about did we think the one that Elizabeth didn't go for is what is the one that
Right.
who forget who found it, Kelly?
Yes.
Yeah, is the one that Kelly found. So this would be different. Yeah. So anyway.
But it's unclear. The season has clearly been. They called it Island of the Idols. They've clearly set the players up to be paranoid about this. So, but yeah, frustrating episode. Like there's still a lot going on. Like we're only so frustrated because we're engaged. But for them to engage us and then leave us hanging on so many different fronts is frustrating.
Yep.
So, but we'll see. I don't feel good about how it goes forward because I feel like Karishma is just in a shitty situation now, because she's got to feel like the girls don't actually have her back, and yet what else is she going to do?
Right.
So she is literally stuck being the black sheep of an alliance with no other choices, and feeling like there's been ample evidence to suggest that nobody there actually likes or cares about her.
Yeah. Hopefully, it just steals her resolve to make the merge,
I hope so,
where
but
she can reset the deck.
yeah.
Yeah. But I don't. I'm not. I'm being optimistic on that.
Yeah.
I don't know that that's going to be the case. I mean, this is going to be sort of a dysfunctional tribe when they come back. You
Yeah.
know. So
I just feel like I cannot imagine that she feels good about this all girl alliance, and because it's like I said earlier, it's popped like a soap bubble. It was never really a thing apparently.
no.
Yeah. So we'll see. But next time, is there a romance between Dean and Chelsea? Is that why Chelsea didn't want to target anyone else? Who knows? Kelly's worried about who's going to go to Island of the Idols next. Looks like I didn't actually take any notes about what Vince said about getting voted out. He just talked about how, like, he's, frustrated that he could have played it. He almost did, but then didn't. And oh well. He didn't seem overly upset, which is probably good. Disappointed, but not, bitter or anything.
Right.
Yeah. So, I guess that'll do it for this time. So thank you everyone for listening and or watching. If you are enjoying the show, please let us know. And we'll be back next week for more Survivor. So try to survive until then.
Bye.